Hello, everyone. I want to welcome Let's Talk. And today, my special guest is Shayna Acree, who is the wife and mother of four children. She is a native of Tallahassee, Florida, and a graduate of Florida State University with a bachelor's in political science. Shayna is also an author, speaker, and life coach. In her first book, There is Hope on the Other Side of Grief, Shayna shares her personal story of grief and loss from the sudden death of her daughter, Amyia. Shayna has a passion for motivating and coaching individuals to journey through the different stages of grief in order to facilitate healing. Shayna believes that even in life's most difficult circumstances, individuals can turn their pain into purpose. So, welcome to the show, Shayna.
Thank you for having me. I am so honored that you asked me to be on your show. Thank you.
I am super excited that you're here today, too. I was reading you. First of all, I like to say congratulations on the new book. I
Thank
actually read it. Literally, I could not put it down. And I
Wow.
think one of the reasons that I could not put it down is because I didn't realize that a lot of the circumstances that I had been through actually was grief.
Yes.
I've really had two major events in my life where I can honestly look back and from reading your book and can pinpoint that those are the areas that I was grieving. And that
Yes.
was the loss of my biological father, and
Mhm.
then when I had a miscarriage. And literally, I grieved in both of those times for probably over a year and did not realize that I was actually in the grieving process. So your book really highlighted some things for me. It really educated me on a lot of things that I necessarily did not even think about at the time. So I am super excited to have you here, to have you go over your book, to tell about your story, and to just encourage everybody out there who's dealing with, grief in their lives right now. So first question I want to ask you is what inspired
Yes.
you to write the book, There is Hope on the Other Side of Grief?
What I have been wanting to write this book for probably 4 years. So it's 2020 now. So probably since 2016, I just never had the courage to. And of course, we're in a pandemic. Um,
Mhm.
we're home. And I really felt this strong push to I really felt this strong push in within me to say it's time to write the book. Um,
Mhm.
of course, we're in a pandemic, and a lot of people are losing family members, friends. People have lost jobs, even marriages have come to an end. So I really wanted to highlight and talk about the grieving process by sharing my story to other people so that people can be inspired and motivated to journey through the grieving process so that they don't get stuck.
Okay. Well, tell us a little bit about the book.
Yes. So the book is just my personal story about the events that took place when I lost my first daughter, Amaya. So I highlight and just take you through a journey. I start with the day before she passed, and I talk about the events that we had together. And I wanted to show people that when you grieve or when you are beginning to lose somebody, you never know. Like you're just not prepared for it. Even in circumstances where you may know that you're going to lose someone, you're not fully prepared and ready for that moment. And Amaya's death was very sudden and very tragic. And I wanted to just take people on a journey to show the different stages that I went through during my grieving process. And so I just told my story. So that's what it is. It's just telling my story from the beginning to the end and showing people um, that the grieving process is difficult,
Mhm.
it's hard, but it's something that we can do so that we don't get stuck or we don't take what we call in the trauma and healing arena is a false bridge. So where you just say, I'm okay, and you take this false bridge and you don't grieve or heal in the right way. And so you can end up later on in life experiencing the grief again and not really understanding what you went through.
Very interesting. So before we get started, let's talk about what the word grief means.
Yes. So the word grief to me means Anything that we lose.
Mhm.
It could be a job, it could be a marriage, it could be a dream, it could be
Mhm.
someone that we love, anything that we lose. So the world teaches us how to attain things, but it doesn't teach us how what to do when we lose things.
Mhm.
So
Exactly.
grief in my opinion is defined as anything that you lose of significance that leaves a devastating impact or trauma
Mhm.
on your life. So that's what I define as grief.
So what are the different stages of grief?
So that's interesting. So, because a lot of people say that, there are 7 stages, there are 5 stages, and someone even broke it down to 3 stages. So I'm just going to go through the 5 stages of grief.
Okay.
So the first stage is shock and denial. So that is it's when the loss initially happens. You don't really understand what's happening. So you're in shock, number one. So you're like, what's happening? I'm not sure what's going on. How do I process this? Or this is impossible. I was just with this person, or I just spoke to this person.
Mhm.
Or I can't believe I lost my job. How is this? I don't get it. So you're in initial shock, in a little bit of denial, because there's a part of you that's not really comprehending what's going on. And that's normal, because that's just your brain trying to catch up to what's happening. The next stage of grief is anger. So you got anger where you, let's say it's after the funeral, you lost someone significant, maybe a child, or you lost a friend, or you lost a marriage. Then you go through the anger process. And so you're infuriated, you're not happy, you're like, why did this happen to me? I don't understand why this had to happen to me. I'm a good person, we're good people, we go to church, we do this, we do that, I pray. And some people may even get to the point where they're angry at God, because I illustrate that in my book. I tell the
Mhm.
story that I was very angry at God, and I talked about it, and I even journaled to God about my pain. And so that's the stage where you're just you're not happy with what's happened, and you're frustrated, and that's normal as well. The next stage is depression. So you go into a depressive state, and
Mhm.
you're crying all the time. There's a song on the radio that plays that person loves, and you're in this state where you're just like, I can't get out of bed, I don't want to move, I don't want to do anything, I don't want to see visitors, I rather just be by myself. So that's where you go into depression.
Mhm.
Number 4, the fourth stage, is bargaining. So it's where you're kind of saying, if I would have done this, then this would not have happened.
Mhm.
So you go through all of these different phases of, if I would have done something differently, then this would have never happened. So you kind of blame yourself, but at the same time, that's a normal stage too. That's just how we as human beings function. And then your final stage, which is acceptance. So you come to the point where you say, this is okay. It's okay that this happened. Um, like for me with Amyia, I got to the point where I said, I didn't want to get to acceptance, if I can be honest with you, if I can
Mhm.
say that, only because I didn't want acceptance to sound like I was okay with losing Amyia,
Mhm.
because I wasn't. But I had to get to my new normal. I had to begin functioning in what life looked like without her. And so acceptance is saying, no, I don't like what happened, but I have to begin the healing process and accept what happened, because that's my reality. We can't go back, unfortunately. We can't change any events that have occurred. But the most important thing for people to do is to journey through all of those different stages, because once you get to acceptance, that's when the real healing begins and starts.
I can definitely relate to that. I think probably acceptance was one of the hardest stages for me after, the loss of my biological father, and even, when I had my miscarriage,
Yes.
because that was my grief had become like a friend to me. I
Yes.
mean, we had bonded, we
Yes.
had set up shop.
Yep.
I was comfortable with it, I was comfortable with the anger, the depression,
Yes.
the why, and acceptance requires you to take a look at that and say, regardless of what I don't understand, I still need to move forward. And I
Yes.
have to admit that acceptance is something that it was difficult for me. I did not want to move forward. I
Yes.
wanted my questions answered and I wanted them answered now.
Yes.
And I was mad because, it didn't work out the way I thought it should work out.
Mm,
So yeah, so acceptance, I mean, literally, it took me a while to get to that
yeah.
point. As I said earlier, in both of my situations, I grieved for well over a year. And I did not realize at the time that I was even in the grieving process. I thought everybody went through, that this is just life. This is just what it was, that
Yeah.
this situation, those situations and circumstance had changed me. So this was the new me.
Exactly.
And it wasn't. It wasn't. It was everything that I continued to hold in that I refused to release. It wasn't the new me. It was just everything that I wasn't willing to let go. And
Yes.
once I let go, I was able to get back to who I am as an individual.
Exactly. And you grow more.
Mhm.
Grieving, I don't think people realize that grieving can lead to growth. it
Yes.
can it can lead you to expand more. And unfortunately in this life, and I'm not going to diminish anyone's loss, because I have also, I've lost Amaya, I've had a miscarriage,
Mhm.
I've lost friends. Like in 2020, my friend recently passed away.
Mhm.
Earlier this week I lost one of my employees, and I had to, and so I'm even in the grieving process now with grieving my employee's loss, her
Mhm.
death, which was very sudden. And so it we're gonna what I try to illustrate to people, and just in a compassionate way, is unfortunately we're gonna lose people.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, we may lose our jobs. I've been in situations where I've lost a job. We may lose a marriage. We may lose um, anything, our finances. We
Mhm.
may lose control of that, but that doesn't define us, and we can expand and grow in the grieving process. It's just knowing, okay, what stage am I in right now? And really telling yourself it's okay that I'm angry. Like, what one of the things that I like to encourage people to do is, when you're angry, you need to say you're angry. And like
Mhm.
you were saying, you want answers. That is so normal.
Mhm.
And I think that is an excellent way of just being self-aware, is knowing that, look, I want answers and I'm angry and I'm frustrated with this. Like, this is not how it should be. Like, I
Mhm.
prayed over my child, or I prayed over this, or I prayed over that. I thought I was doing the right thing. But it's important to acknowledge it and be self-aware of it, because if you're not aware and you're just walking around saying, I'm okay, I'm okay, I'm okay, diminishing your feelings, you're going to stay stuck.
Mhm. So one of the things, and I have my book, so I have all these little sticky notes in
Oh,
here. But
I
one of the
love it.
things that I found in chapter 5 is called Beauty for Ashes, and what you said on there, I mean, this like just resonated with my heart so much. But it said, "Death arrived at my doorstep unannounced, uninvited, and took my child away. Then grief arrived and took a seat on my couch." And I mean, literally, I was in tears because
Wow.
that is like how I felt after I had my miscarriage. I mean, it
Yes.
was devastating for me.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
and just to give you a little backstory on that situation is that my husband and I, we had gotten married. We've been trying to have a child. We've been told that we couldn't get pregnant. And then
Mm.
we got pregnant, maybe almost 4 or 5 years into the marriage. So we were super excited. I mean, oh my gosh, we were super excited. I mean, my husband went out. He wrote me this long, beautiful letter about what type of wonderful mom I was going to
Oh
be,
my
and brought me
goodness.
all these flowers. I mean, this was like a dream come true for us. And
Yes.
then a couple of weeks later, like literally, I had a miscarriage. And I did not understand it. I mean, literally, it was my husband's birthday and I started cramping. And,
Oh,
I lost the
wow.
baby like the next day. And I know he was devastated. I was devastated. It was just like, why, God, why?
Absolutely.
Um, and I think to add, I say add salt to the wound, immediately after I lost my child, all of my friends got pregnant, like literally. And that was like the
Oh,
most difficult stage in my life because I was so happy for them, but I was
absolutely.
so sad for myself. Like, how
Absolutely.
in the world am I supposed to
Yes.
survive going to, I mean, literally, it was like five of my friends. So I had to do the baby showers, I had to do, all these things. And I think people meant well at the time, but some of the things that they told me, like, oh, well, you can have another baby. And it's like, you have no idea. We've been trying for 5 years. What do you mean?
Right.
And it's
Right.
like, oh, well, it's fine. And people act, because I hadn't had a physical child, they acted like, my baby didn't matter. I didn't want a replacement baby. I wanted the baby I lost. And
Say
that
that.
was like
Yes.
that is what I could not make people understand. So it's like I kind of just, stayed to myself. It's like I didn't want to talk to anybody. I didn't want to be around anybody because when stuff like that, I knew that they meant well, but I knew that at my stage, if I said something, it would not come out right.
Right. No, that's good.
So it was, I mean, that was the most difficult part for me. It's just, I mean, I could relate to that sentence in that book so well because it was like he just took a seat right in my house and really just took over my life at that point.
Really. Death arrived at my front door. I
Mhm,
didn't, and it came uninvited. It,
mhm,
it wasn't anything, and I can so relate to you even on the miscarriage scale because I experienced the miscarriage in 2016, and I will be very honest with you. I was excited about that baby,
mhm.
and I agree with you. You don't. It's not that. Yes, you can have another baby, but you want that
That
baby.
baby, yeah.
You want that baby.
Mhm,
And I was excited and I went through the same experience that you went through. Me and my husband, we were, it wasn't an expected pregnancy, but it
mhm,
was one that we were like, okay, if God has given us another child, like he must
mhm,
trust us. Like, okay, this is it. And I went through a grieving process then
mhm,
and even went through a traumatic period of why am I losing children?
mhm,
Why is this my story? I don't understand why this continues to happen. And so I can relate to you. And yeah, here's another thing that I want to add, if it's okay.
mhm.
When we have people in our lives who are supporting us in our grieving process, sometimes it does help for them not to say a whole lot.
Right. Just to
A lot of
listen.
times,
Just
a
listen.
lot of, yes, a lot of times, you know, people say the cliche thing, they try to say the right thing that they believe will bring comfort, but sometimes it may be important for the person who's grieving just to have a friend there
Mhm,
sitting with them. I also had a friend who lost a child a couple of years ago, and I just went and sat with her. I didn't
mhm,
say, I sat there, I held her hand while she cried, and I said nothing for hours and
mhm.
until she was ready to talk. So that if I want to encourage people who are supporting people who are going through the grieving process. A lot of times you don't have to say anything. You can
Right.
just sit and be with that person. They just need your presence and support.
Exactly. Yes, and that's definitely some good advice. Just just be there.
Just be
Just
there.
be there.
Yes.
Another section in your book, it says, my grieving was a process, not a destination. I had to learn that it was okay to not be okay.
Yes.
Um, that also spoke volumes to me because I am so used to helping everyone else, making sure everyone else was okay, that
Yes.
even during the times when I was experiencing grief, I didn't want other people to be uncomfortable or have to worry
Yeah.
about me. So I put on this whole thing like, I'm fine, everything's good. I didn't
Mhm.
cry, I didn't express any emotions around anyone. But at some point there was a breaking point for me
Yes.
where because I had not properly grieved prior to, when it was time for me to grieve, it was bad. I mean,
Wow.
literally, it was like just days upon days of crying because I hadn't grieved at the time when I should have.
Yes,
So that is something I also want to encourage people, is to go through the stages, because if you don't, that's when, that when you don't heal properly, that's when the problems come in.
I agree.
And for me, I had tried to be strong for so long. And then when I broke, I literally broke. Like
Right.
literally, I was days in the house, could not get out of
Oh,
bed. I mean, literally just did not know what to do. And it's because, when I should have been crying, when I should have been allowing myself to express these emotions and feelings, I was trying to make sure nobody had to worry about me, which it was okay for me to not be okay. It was okay for me to
right.
cry. It was okay for
Right.
me to be depressed. It was okay for me to grieve.
I love that. Thank you for sharing. I think too, we're taught to be strong.
Mhm.
As culture teaches women, especially Black women, you have to be strong and it's going to be okay. I even had someone tell me not to cry at my own child's funeral. And that just boggled my
Right.
mind. I was like, what are you
What?
talking about? Get out of my face. Like,
Right.
I need it to be, sometimes we need to be undone. There's a reason why we have certain emotions that rise up within
Mhm.
us. Crying is not a bad thing. Being not okay is not a bad
Right.
thing. It's just this is just where I am right now, but I know that this is not a destination. This is
Right.
just a journey for me. And it's
Mhm.
important for people to understand, don't take that false bridge of the grieving process where you're saying, nope, I'm okay, and I'm just going to take this bridge and go this way and not focus on my healing process, because
Mhm.
like you said, it will come out eventually. And I've seen it even here in 2020 in the pandemic. A lot of people aren't as busy as they used to be,
Mhm.
especially when the pandemic first started. People were not as busy because you had to stay home. Well, now
Mhm.
it's a little different, but when you have to sit with yourself
Right. Look, there's
for
no
a period,
escaping you.
you can't escape you. There's
Right.
nothing going on. A
Mhm.
lot of times it would, that grief will sit on the couch and say, okay, are you going to deal with me now?
Mhm.
You going to deal with this? We're going
Right.
to work through this, right? So I think that's important to understand. Try not for people to try not to take the false bridge. I was on the journey of taking the false bridge because it was just too painful to deal with.
Right. Deal with. Yeah.
It really was. It was just too painful. But I had to go through the journey step by step by step, in order to find healing. And even now, Joanna, if I can be honest, I cry.
Mhm.
I cry for Amyia. I cry for the baby I lost, the
Mhm.
babies I've lost. Um, I do. I still have those moments, those triggers. But the thing about it is, when you go through the grieving process, there may be something that triggers you, maybe a birthday, maybe the death day, whatever that day is. Yes, it may trigger you, but you know that you're there for just the weekend.
Right.
I'm here for a moment.
Right.
I know how to get back out.
Exactly.
So it's important to remember that too. So it's just sometimes it's just a
Mhm.
weekend or even a day or even an hour where you may
Mhm.
cry and have that moment. But because you journeyed through the process, you
Mhm.
know, okay, I'm here and I know how to get out.
Yeah, and I just got to get back up. Another thing that I have done with myself, because even today, like I'm like on the verge of tears,
That's
just because of remembering all of the things that I went through during that time. But
absolutely.
um, what I do now is I just allow myself time to grieve. I say, you know
Yeah.
what, today is just one of those days. I'm just gonna cry it out. And
Yes.
tomorrow I get back up and I move on.
There you
So
go.
that has been refreshing to me, to have the emotions, to deal with the emotions, but then to say, you know what? I can't stay here because I know this is not a good place for me to stay.
Correct.
But I'm gonna let myself feel what I feel for the moment, and then
Absolutely.
I'm gonna get back up and I'm gonna move on.
I
So if
love
you
it.
see me cry or whatever throughout, is that is just, you know, you're gonna have triggers.
You're
You're
gonna have
you're gonna
triggers.
have triggers. Things are gonna make you, you know, you may see something that makes you think about it. You may hear something. You may watch something. You may talk about something that you know brings you trigger. But it's okay. It's
Yeah,
okay to not
not
be
be
okay.
okay. And I want
Definitely.
that to be people's, something that people go to, even if it's the final month of
Mhm.
2020 and you're just like, I am so done. That's
Right.
okay.
It's okay.
It's okay. Just say
Right.
I'm not okay today,
Right.
and be okay with it. I have moments like that even to this day.
Mhm. Another thing you talked about in your book is that you went to Jesus and you believe that he directed you straight to therapy.
Yes.
Now, and I have to admit, I am a firm believer of getting you some help now. But at the time, like
Hmm.
literally no one in my family, no one from the time I can ever remember, I don't remember anybody going to a therapist or even talking about it. It was like shake it off, get yourself together, pull your big girl pants up, and get back out there. Um, but I want people to know that it's okay to talk to people. It's okay if you can't deal with the emotions on your own. It's okay to seek help.
Yeah.
And that's something that I never did. I tried to internalize everything and help myself, and I was in no position to help myself.
Oh,
I
that's a good
needed,
point.
someone stronger who could look at the situation with a new pair of eyes and who could show me the positive things because I couldn't see them on my own. Now I always tell everyone I don't go to just any therapist. So you have to be mindful of who you're allowing in that area of your life. But
Mhm.
there is help out there. There's good help out there. And
Yes,
I, encourage anybody who's dealing with or even struggling in this area to go seek help.
absolutely.
I mean, I cannot tell you now, I have seen therapists now, and it has just taken a load off. It's helped me
Yes,
process a lot of things that I didn't necessarily know how to process on my own. It has given me wisdom in some areas. It's even shown me some things as to why I'm experiencing some of the things that I'm experiencing that I
yes.
never knew. I thought something was wrong with me,
Wow,
and here it
yeah.
is. It's just the process that you're going through. This is what's happening to you, and it's
Yes,
like if I hadn't been through therapy and if I hadn't, you know, uh, you know, s- sought this, I would never notice. I would be still walking around confused and thinking that there's something wrong with me.
right,
When all along you're just going through the grieving process. And if you go
right.
through it, you'll end up on the other side.
So good.
So yeah, so that is something that I love that. And you also say in here surrendering was the first steps towards healing, which I absolutely love because in my situation I had to release. I had to deal with the way I was feeling and then I had to give it to God so I could move on. Even
Absolutely.
even though I didn't understand, even though I didn't know why, even though I was angry in some parts, I had to give it to him and say, God, take this from me.
Yes,
Even in
it's
the midst of
important.
all of that, take it
It's
from me.
from me. We can't bear everything, and I'm a type of person. Sadly, I like control. I like to be in control of things, but I had to learn through this particular process. You can't be in control of this. You gotta
Mhm.
gotta release this and let it go. And when I got to the point where I did surrender to God, I was able to invite things into my life that gave me the help, like you were saying. Going and seeking a therapist. I really believe that. Listen, God creates people
Mhm.
and God creates people who take on certain vocations. And it's important to understand that, because my family, they were just like, we don't go to therapists, we go to
Right.
Jesus. But at the same
Right.
time, Jesus can direct you to a therapist, and that's
Mhm.
okay. And they have the tools to
Mhm.
help you. There are advocates, life coaches,
Mhm.
counselors, therapists. They are our advocates. They're there to help us. But we also have to surrender the control or surrender the pain or surrender it and release it in order to invite the new in. So that's
Exactly. 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 Another thing that I found encouraging on here is that you gave the scripture Isaiah 63:3, and it says,
Yes,
to appoint unto them who mourn in Zion, to give them beauty for ashes, the oil of joy for mourning, the garment of praise for the spirit of heaviness, that they might be called the trees of righteousness, the planting of the Lord, that he might be glorified. And I cannot tell you how true that is. You cannot carry the burden of grief on your own. But if you give it to God, He will definitely give you beauty for ashes.
yes.
That scripture was so encouraging to me after I had my miscarriage.
Mhm.
And just to even give you a testimony about the greatness of God.
Yes,
But let me read this first. It says, letting go and accepting my circumstance meant that I could move forward and turn my pain into purpose. The important thing to remember is that it's not a journey, it's that it's a journey and not a destination.
yes.
And that is something that literally I cannot, God just the awesomeness of God, if you just will let him into those areas that you are so hurt, that you are so broken, and allow him to do healing. So in my circumstances, I lost my child. We had continued to try to have kids after that. Everything failed.
Mm,
We were at the point where we were actually adopting, getting ready to adopt. We had went through the process. We were waiting on a child, and then we got pregnant. But the beauty of it all is that my due date for this new baby was on the same date that I lost my other baby. So he turned that date into a date of mourning for me, into a
wow.
date of, expectation and praise. So I'm always grateful to him. It was 3 years later, but every time that day came up, it's like my heart would just be broken, and
Yes.
he turned that all around. So every time that day came up now, I was like, this is the date that my son is going to be born. He came 3 weeks early, but I was so excited and so grateful that he turned something that was so negative into my life into something that was had so much expectation. So
Oh,
I
that's
just encourage
beautiful.
you guys to allow him into those places. He hears you, he loves you, he cares for you, and he's concerned about the things that you're concerned of. And sometimes it doesn't always look like we think it's going to look, but in the end, he is still good.
Yes, he
He
is.
is still good.
And that's what he does. I think that's a beautiful promise that God grants us. I will give you beauty for
Mhm.
your ashes. And that is an amazing gift that he provides to us in our time of grief and mourning. And I'm always just so thankful because I lost Amaya. Amaya was my only daughter at the time. And then 2014, I became pregnant and I had Lolo, look, Lauren, my daughter. And I knew from jump she was a girl. Like the moment I found out I was pregnant, I knew it was a girl. I was like, this is the promise that God
Mhm.
has granted me. A lot of times we think that he takes things like the world will take from us. But when we have faith in God and who he is and how big he is, he can always give us that everything back.
Mhm.
And a lot of times, and we have to look at the story of Job. Job went
Mhm.
through grief, he went through so much pain and loss, but look what happened at the end of his story. And if you look at Job and you read his story, you will see the stages of grief in his
Mhm.
story. And so
Exactly.
it's a beautiful, it does not have to be this horrible thing. Like any loss is horrible, but we have to understand that there is light on the other side of the tunnel. Like there is
Mhm.
light, like and God is with us. Even in the scriptures, he said he is near the brokenhearted. So even
Exactly.
when we feel like he's far away, when we're in our deepest pain, he's actually really, really close to us,
Right.
going through that journey with us. So thank you for sharing your beautiful testimony. That's beautiful.
And even in that whole situation, God has allowed me to use that story to witness to so many people, especially
Oh
women
wow.
who are bearing or women who were struggling and to conceive. He is just so good to say. I cannot tell you how he turned my story of pain into a story of hope that's still, touching people's lives today. So I'm super, grateful. I always tell people that, yes, if I had to go through it again and what I want to, no.
No,
But I
yeah,
think
yeah,
about all of what God has done through that, all the goodness that he has done through that. And I'm not saying that God took my child because I don't believe that, but I'm
right.
saying he used even that and turned it
Yes,
around for something positive.
absolutely.
So I am a firm believer that there is hope on the other side of grief.
Yes.
Firm
Amen.
believer of that.
I love it.
So what did you learn about writing this book?
Woo, so many things. Um, One of the things is that whatever I set my mind to, whatever God has purposed me to do, I can do.
Mhm.
The book was very difficult for me to write, if I can be honest. I went through, because I had to talk about the day that it happened and what occurred. I had to talk about, what happened after the funeral. So I had to go back and tell my story. And that was a very difficult thing for me to do. And so, um, what I learned was you have the strength and you have the courage to tell the story. You are a writer, no matter what anyone says or feels, because I had so many, if I can just be transparent, I had so much doubt and fear. I was so worried that I would be judged by the things I would say in this book. I was afraid that people would, you know, maybe take it the wrong way. I didn't know how the book was going to be perceived. I was more concerned about people than I was concerned about the message.
Mhm.
And so I had to get over myself really and get over that and journey through it. I also didn't realize how much courage I had
Mhm.
to tell the story because there were points throughout when I was writing, I was just like, I can't do this. This
Mhm.
is just too hard. This is just too difficult. And I have a mentor, and I would share with her, and she says, listen, there are people who need this book.
Exactly.
And remember, you're going back just to tell a story. You're not there anymore.
Mhm.
And so I said, okay, now I have to, you're right. Now I got to try to just navigate through this whole process. But I cried throughout the entire process. And then there was just this cry of relief because I couldn't believe that there was this tangible like thing like this was within my body and now it's out, and
Right.
so that was just an amazing feeling. So yeah, I learned that I could overcome fear with just doing it anyway. I
Mhm.
found courage and I said, okay, God, now I see my purpose. So I learned all of those things about myself.
Awesome. So what surprised you most about your process? And it could be the process of grief, it could be the process of you writing the book. What were you surprised the most by this whole thing?
I think I was surprised about I think I was more surprised about writing the book, if I can be honest. No one, no one in my family has written a book.
Mhm.
I'm not saying that they never wanted to,
Mhm.
but I'm the first one to do it. And so that surprised me that I actually did it. I was actually shocked at myself
Mhm.
that I was able to overcome some fears and put, the rubber to the road and actually write out things. Um, I was also surprised at how well it was received because I was not expecting that. I was just telling a story, and I felt like I said earlier the push to really put this book out during this time, and it was received. So I just had no expectation that it was be received the way it did, and how a lot of people shared that they feel like it was a teaching tool,
Mhm.
and I did not realize that. I thought I was just telling a story, and people was like, "This is a tool to teach people about grief and what it looks like to journey through it and how to even support people who are grieving. So I was
Mhm.
surprised at
So, what advice would you give someone who is struggling to overcome grief?
that. Yeah. Give yourself some grace. Give yourself a lot of grace. A lot of grace.
Mhm.
It's not going to be a pretty journey. It's going to be one filled with some challenges, maybe some obstacles. Um, you're going to hit some bumps in the road. You may trip and fall and scrape your knee, like that type of
Right.
stuff. It's
Exactly.
going to be, and when I say that, I mean it in a way of it's going to be painful. But what I want to encourage individuals to do is just to take the steps. Don't look at it from an expectation of, I want to get here and I want to get there quickly. But just say, I'm just going to take it day by day. And each day, I'm going to give myself some grace to journey through this whole process. Don't have any expectations of what it'll look like. Because what I try to also tell people and share with individuals is that everyone's grief journey looks different. Yours not going to look like mine, just like our fingerprints are unique to whom we are. Our grief journey is going to be unique to who we are. And so we just have to give ourselves a lot of grace, take it step by step, day by day, and just have no expectations of what it's going to look like. This is your journey, and it's going to be a beautiful thing. And that's,
Exactly.
that's the last thing is it's going to be beautiful.
Exactly. And one of the things that I also realized during this time is just not to compare myself to others. Like, I should be over this by now.
I do.
Just like you said, I everything is different. People grieve in different ways. They have different ways of processing. So stop saying there's no reason why I should be feeling this way. You feel how you feel. Walk through it.
Walk through it.
Walk through
It's
it.
okay.
Mhm.
Like,
It's okay to not be okay.
okay. And Joanna, you're so right. I still struggle with comparison as well, but I have to tell myself, nope, girl, we're not doing that today.
Right.
Like, girl, we're not doing
Not
that
today.
today. So I totally relate to that. So never try not to compare yourself or to your journey to anyone else's. And if an individual is, just snap yourself out of it. Just say, nope, we're not doing that. This is my journey. That's their journey. And it just looks different. So I just want to encourage people to do that. And it's it's going to be unique.
Mhm.
It's going to be unique, but the stages will look the same.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So resources are available to assist those who are struggling, with grief?
So there are so many resources. One is my book, so you can anybody can
Exactly.
purchase it on, so that's one resource because I wanted to give people a story so they didn't feel like they were by themselves
Mhm.
or, you know, uh, I know in my grieving process, I just thought I was a horrible person because I was feeling the way that I felt. No one advocated for me. So my book is a great resource. But however, I really want to encourage people to seek some counseling
Mhm.
or seek a life coach, a mentor. But I really want people to be, you know, very careful about who they choose. Just be very mindful. You want somebody who is tailor made specifically for you, and that's vice versa with any coach or counselor, therapist, whatever. But there's an abundance of resources. But I strongly suggest getting an advocate, which is a counselor, a coach, a life coach, or a therapist to help you through that journey. I really think it's helpful to have somebody you can see walking with you during
Mhm.
that process.
Exactly. So how can we stay connected with you?
Yes, so you can stay connected with me. You can follow me on social media. I'm on Instagram and Facebook. From Amyia is my ministry. So you can follow me there. You can see the things that I'm doing. Um, so you can follow me there. You can also go to my website and you can connect with me there. It's from Amyia, FROMAMYIA.com. My business, my ministry is dedicated to Amyia because everything that I learned from being a teenage, having her at 14, and then losing her when she was 13, everything that I learned and I gained and I attained, of course, is from God, but God gifted her to me. But I gave it the ministry, the name from Amyia, because it's all from her.
Awesome. So, what words of encouragement would you like to leave us as we close out?
Oh, what words of encouragement? I would say just what we've been talking about this whole time. Number one, it's okay to not be okay. And also, do the best you can with what you have. What God gives us all the tools that we need. It doesn't mean we're going to execute it perfectly, but just do the best you can with what you have. This year has been very, very hard for a lot of people. So just navigate through it the best you can.
I also like something else she said is to give yourself some grace.
Yes, that's
You are
yes,
you
that
are doing the
too.
best you can at this point, and if you wake up and you're just trying to survive, then just survive.
Just survive.
Just
Just
just,
do it.
just do it.
Just do it.
But I
Don't
love that the fact that you say,
yes.
give yourself some grace because oftentimes we don't.
We don't. We really want to be strong and I feel like giving yourself grace is a strong trait to have.
Mhm.
You have to, honor yourself and just say, you know what, just I don't have a lot today,
Yeah.
but I'm gonna give myself my disgrace today. Like that's all I got. That's all I got.
Right. Awesome. Okay, well, thank you so much for joining the show. I look forward um, to talking with you again. I'm sure we can have a conversation on pretty much any subject.
Yes,
I
anything,
definitely know that
anything.
I definitely know you'll be back on the show. If you
Yes.
guys have not got her book, I please go out there and get her book. It is really good. As I say, I learned some things in here that I had necessarily known about grief. It is a powerful tool. It is a powerful testimony on just where God had her at and where He brought her to. It's just a beautiful story of love. It's a beautiful story of just moving on and just dealing with emotion, the hard emotions. Dealing with the hard things, and just having the courage to walk through it. So please go out. Her book is listed on Amazon. There's hope. I don't know if you can see it. There's hope on the other side of grief. It's super, super good. So you guys take a look. All
Can
right.
I also
Until
say
next.
one thing before we
Yeah,
wrap
sure.
up?
Uh-huh.
Congratulations on your book.
Oh, thank
Congratulations.
you. Thank
I've been
you.
wanting
Thank
to tell you
you.
that. So, congratulations to you as well.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yes, yes.
All right, guys. Until next time, goodbye.
Bye.